All right, so welcome everybody, and nice to see you here. This workshop that we proposed for the Environmental History Week of the American Society of Environmental History is titled Defining Applied Environmental History. And this might sound quite ambitious, but I think that we're not going to find the final definition for applied history today, but it is rather a next step in a longer process of thinking about how to connect to the real world out there from the perspective of academic research and teaching as well. The general background in Europe perhaps could be pointed out by as a report by Markus Hall and his colleagues from Switzerland, who have compiled quite voluminous overview of what applied environmental humanities might mean. And from here, we will go on and present some cases that we have and our participants have decided to bring forth as good examples of how the academic knowledge can be used and turned into practical solutions that actually work in real life and that have an impact on the real life and how we perceive the world and the environment. And after these demonstrations that include also interactive elements and also some agency from behalf of all the other participants, then we will proceed to the discussion and the question whether there is something more to applied environmental humanities, whether there is something that we should not do if we want to do applied research, and also some perhaps general comments about why and how we as researchers should go and enter the real world beyond our ivory tower. The background to this topic of applied environmental humanities from Estonian perspective, from the perspective of the Center of Estonian Center for Environmental History, is perhaps on one hand a simple fact that we received some project money to research, to make research into applied environmental history from Tallinn University. But this is not something that happened just so. On the background, there is a long time work, especially by Ulrike Plaat and Linda Kajundi, in cooperating with museums, art museums, history museums, with making environmental history focused exhibitions, and also from more recently working with the cultural heritage of oil shale mining, for example. So there are different streams of input coming together here, and we'll see whether it becomes a little rivulet today. Ulrike, is there anything important to add
maybe not at that point. Maybe just let's go into the case studies and have the discussion after that.
Yeah. All right. Then we will proceed in the alphabetical order of the projects that are going to be presented. And the first one is the project Brood Life by Tallinn University. The team consisted of Ulrike Plaat and Kaarel Vanamölder, and a whole bunch of good students. And Kaarel will present the project of historical beer making. Here we go.
Thank you, Kadri, and hello, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kaarel Vanamölder, and I am an assistant professor at Tallinn University. While the time is really short, then at first I put you here once more into the chat and in this Zoom.
Kaarel, you muted yourself.
Which you are all very much welcome to look right now. So please, there is a link into the chat in Zoom. Please open it and let's watch the short movie at first. I think it ends like in 3 minutes or something. So please.
And we organize it so that everyone opens it in their own computers. We're not going to do screen share because the audio and video qualities are not
enough.
Are not enough. Yeah. So enjoy the movie pause.
So I think we are through the movie, and so I will explain shortly about it. So this movie was made as one of these final results of our project held at the University of Tallinn. It's called Brood Life. Brood Life, where it's the name Life comes from the abbreviation in Estonian language. Life means at the same time also elu, so it is word by word translated, but it sounds still good also in English. So at Tallinn University, there is such a format for creating university projects, scientific projects, but not only. It means you take the students or you collect students from very, very different specialities, not only historians, but and also not only students from humanities. For instance, you can also take people from the real sciences, etc. You form the group, and then the group starts to do something. You know, they can put together their own interests, their own interest in science, in the studies, and then to form something. So there has to be always a question what to do, and also there is a very important side is the cooperation with free enterprises. So this is one side, university. Different students, interdisciplinary research, or dealing with some topic on interdisciplinary level, and then also you take some institution from outside from the university, free enterprises, for instance. And so 3 years ago, or already at 2018, we started a project called Brewed Life, and our aim was to start to recreate or reconstruct the historical beers, the historical beer recipes, and to put them and to see will they function also nowadays, how it is possible to interpret the historical recipes in nowadays worlds. At the same time, also when we know the craft beer is a very popular and very trendy thing, so this is what we also used, and we collaborate with a small brewery in Tallinn. The small brewery and pub is called Humanities, and here on the picture you see the brewmaster, who is also actually in the fact a student of history at another university, and then you see also the logo of the brewery. So we took the students and we said, let's start to brew, let's start to look into the sources, and then see what we can work out with that. So the first project, Brewed Life, started at 2018 and lasted 1 year. So the first year, the first semester students, the first term students collected materials, mainly recipes, etc., etc. So they at first we wanted to find and reconstruct the local recipes, and then to use the brewing as a method. You know, we write about environmental history, we write about history, and the outcome is a text, but can there be also another outcomes? Can we use a brewing as a method in order to focus on the topics linked to environmental history? So then we try to use it, and then also try to just kind of on the wider scope to make use of the past. So, and the first project was quite successful. As a result, we had this beer you see on the picture. It's Kuuse Willems Spruce Willie. It was the spruce tip carrot beer, and that was exactly this product you saw also on this short movie. So this how the making of this product was filmed, and this product became or was used as an official beer of the ASEH conference in Tallinn, and it's also nowadays the official goodie of Tallinn University. So university is also using it, and at the same time also the brewery, the pub, has the rights on this beer. They have already brewed it several times, and it is still quite popular. It is kind of light, crispy, nice beer for the conference. Those who were at or in Tallinn 2 years ago, you probably remember this nice beer. So and now this year we started another project called Brewed Life second batch. and and we are again already on the second semester. So that means at first students had to find the new recipes, digging into archives, digging into the libraries, into the digital libraries, in our current times it is very important. And then also a student, they translated it, they translated sources, because generally they were written whether in German mainly or in English, but generally in German. When we deal with the local past here, with the local history, everything is written in German mainly. And then also we started to interpret these, or we started to try to understand these recipes in the 18th century, or for instance the recipes of the 17th, 18th century. They want to put a lot of spices there inside into the beers, all kind of spices. So where do we get these spices? Do we have these spices nowadays? Yes, you can go to the Oriental shop nowadays and generally buy almost everything, but how people got these spices those times, etc. And then also another scope, when we already finished the material, so that we had the sources, then we gave these description how to brew the beer to the local brewmaster, and then he looked at it and said, is it possible to use this amount of information in order to brew the beer or not? And then he started also to interpret from his side how to put it into the nowadays language. What kind of crops to use, for instance, what kind of spices to use? Do we have this kind of, or what kind of water to use, for instance? And so this project, it provides a lovely possibility exactly about this kind of reflecting the use of history about it in contemporary food culture. I mean, also craft beers, pubs, talking about beer, writing the beer, etc. And then also the analyzing all the big changes. So when we use the same rye, for instance, so when in recipes it's mentioned use the rye, then nowadays these rye sorts are very much cultivated for the brewing industry. So on the 18th century, it was just a rye from the fields. Can we compare them at all? So this outcome, what we have, is it actually a historical beer, or is it just our interpretation about these recipes? And when we write, for instance, when we write about the history, do we write the history, or do we have also the same interpretation? So is there so big difference between brewing and writing the history? And of course we had also lovely seminars. Then we made like 10 pilot beers, and then we had the degustating evenings, and some beers were really, I would say, generally our students found them very disgusting, saying that that's not a beer. Or that's not a common beer, and others were on other hand very, very popular, etc. And then the second phase is now to pick up the final beer and then to turn it into the product. So what do you put on the label? How do you refer to the past? This text you heard from the movie was directly translated from the 1805 cookbook. So what do you use? So this is a word by word. So, but is it the same beer or not? Or is it only about the storytelling, how the environment has changed, and etc., etc. This is all what we are dealing about. So, and here you see the picture about the brewing process, when we have already written down the recipe, what we are going to do. We were brewing here a Mannheimer beer, and so you see it is already the interpretation of the brewer. So the brewmaster, how he sees it, how many grams you have to take, when at the same time in the recipes it's just that take some crops, put it there inside, brew the beer. So this is all this kind of topics what according our ideas it is possible to use to focus the students more about this kind of the big change what we have seen and what we have lived through. So I think 10 minutes is over right now. So thank you very much. And that was, and I'm very pity that you don't have the possibility to taste the beer. Yes, thanks.
All right, thank you, Karel. And I think this project was then associated with university teaching, with interpreting historical sources, but it also has its outcome in commercial world. And I think this is something that we should also discuss later, about this commercialization of historical research. Is it good or bad? What does it mean to us? But now we will take the second project, and this comes from UK, and it is Care for Our Commons Home, and it is going to be presented by Kate Rigby and Sharon Gartham. Here we go.
Thank you very much, Kadri. So I'm going to begin with just a short PowerPoint to give a little bit of context for environmental humanities research at Bath Spa University. Then Sharon's made a little video, 5-minute video about her doctoral research that she's just starting on. So let's see how my screen share goes to begin with. Okay. So I'd like to preface this with just a few general observations. I understand the environmental humanities to be almost always applied, or to have an applied dimension in its kind of full-blown transdisciplinary form. And this has three aspects. Firstly, it tends to be problem-oriented. That is to say that it arises from, the questions that are being pursued arise from and respond to matters of social ecological concern in the wider world. Secondly, different disciplinary approaches to knowledge are integrated. So it has an interdisciplinary dimension. And thirdly, it also often involves co-investigation and co-production of knowledge with stakeholders and with knowledge holders, not only across but beyond the academy. And I just want to share three examples of projects at Bath Spa that do this. I can't seem to get this to go into slideshow, so I'll just do it one screen at a time. This is how we, let's see if I can get this to move on. Oh, do you know, I might just have to stop and start again, because sometimes this can happen, I've discovered. Let's try again. Slideshow. My computer's on a go slow.
If you could just try to switch the,
how's that?
Switch the slides manually from the left-hand side panel.
Yeah, has that worked?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so so this is how we've endeavoured to frame environmental humanities research in the Research Centre for Environmental Humanities at Bath Spa. How can humanities scholars, artists, writers, natural and social scientists work with each other and public communities to produce ethical, creative, historically informed and culturally sensitive responses to environmental problems. So that's a little bit of a mouthful, but let me give you some specific examples. So the first is one that I was actually involved in myself when I first came to Bath Spa, a project funded by the AHRC and led by Sarah Penryn-Jones, Troubled Waters, Stormy Futures, Heritage in Times of Accelerated Climate Change. And this was concerned with asking the question of how do we view transition towards or even shape the future through the past in the horizon of climate change. And it involved a focus on 3 sites, one in North Wales, one in Cornwall, and one in Kiribati in the South Pacific, where people are already experiencing the impacts of climate change and where there are concerns about how to safeguard cultural and also natural heritage in the face of these impacts. I was involved with the Kiribati case study, and this actually led to a follow-on project, which was kind of led by the community in Kiribati that we were working with, and took the form of finding practical solutions to actually address their issues with waste. These are just some thumbnail sketches of transdisciplinary projects. Towards Hydro Citizenship was a very big project led by my former colleague, Owen Jones. It was from, again, the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK, Connected Communities programme. And as you can see, this generated initiatives and outputs, including practical interventions in local landscapes, new community environment-oriented artworks, and critical reflection on the nature of citizenship and community when they are reimagined from ecological perspectives. And the term hydro-citizenship was adopted and adapted from the concept of ecological citizenship. And in this project, this concept was put to work within the contemporary context of individual and community engagements with water. So the Bristol-based case study, for example, involved working with the Eels Conservancy and educators to engage kids with the challenges of declining eel numbers. And just to engage, people of Bristol with the extraordinary watery ecologies that they live alongside, but about which many people don't really know very much. And thirdly, this is a project, a relatively new project just started this year, funded by the AHRC and the DFG, the German Research Council. Historicising nature's cultures and laws in the Etosha Kunune conservation territories of Namibia. And this is a cross-disciplinary environmental humanities project which proposes a multivocal and historical analysis to contribute new thinking on colonialism, indigeneity and natural history. And it arises from an earlier project led by Sean in Namibia, which included collaborations with the Save the Rhino Trust, but also involved mapping sites of cultural significance in what had become a national park to redefine that park as natural cultural heritage, as a cultural landscape. And in this case, the aim is to support laws and praxis in biodiversity conservation to more fully recognise the diversity of past cultures and natures constituting this internationally valued region. If you go to our website, you'll see numerous other projects as well, but I thought that these were some interestingly kind of varied trio. So now Sharon is going to share with you her project, which is just beginning. I shall stop sharing. And Sharon, do you want to take over?
Yes, I'll just give a very brief introduction to the project, and then I've got a video which I think Kate's put the link in the chat already, haven't you? So it's a little closer to home in the UK here. It's a project based on Rodwood Common, which is, I can pretty much see from where I'm sat here today. I started working with a local conservation charity last August, and they run, they're part of a conservation programme on Rodborough Common, which is a special area of conservation. And they've been running these mitigation activities for about the last 4 years to varying degrees of success, but they're doing them very much from a scientist conservationist perspective. And what I'm hoping to bring through this project is the perspective of the environmental humanities. So yeah, and hopefully we want you to actually have a look on the site. So that's why we've made the video, so you can get a little bit of a view of what I'm talking about. So if you want to go and click on the link and view the video and pop back when you're done. Okay.
All right, thanks. I think we're all more or less on the same page again. So, Sharon.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that, Kajak.
Yeah, so would you like to make a comment on the movie?
Yeah, I mean, the video doesn't quite show you the cattle. The cattle are not released yet, so you're not quite seeing the full use of the common at the moment. But yeah, I hoped it sort of gave a little bit of a context about the kind of challenges that we faced here. And those challenges are particularly important from an environmental humanities point of view, because common land is so, the attitudes to in modern days are very much rooted in the past and in our feeling about the contestation of that land. So, and I think that affects you know, how we can manage those lands today. So in that way, it's sort of ideal for applying the environmental humanities in context. So that helps.
All right, so thank you. And I think that we have plenty of material for the further discussion on how to engage other species to applied environmental humanities, and how to engage communities into environmental humanities. I think it's yeah, this is perhaps what these catchwords that I would mark or check, but perhaps there are some more. So thanks. And we will proceed to Ecopolis Munich. And Christoph?
Thank you very much, Katri, and thank you also to those who just presented. I think it's these are wonderful projects, and I can first attest to the quality of the beer. I was not at the ASEH, but I was brought a bottle, and it was wonderful. And maybe, of course, I didn't know that this is about beer, but I think I'll also talk a little bit about beer. And I also talk a little bit about the place where we live, because I feel very strongly that one of the things that we can do as environmental humanities scholars is try to understand where we're actually coming from, the relationship between humans and the place in which we live, through food, through people who have lived where we are in the past and have shaped the nature together with more than human beings. And I think that's very much at the core. I also felt when I saw the beer thing, it reminded me of teaching about food, because somehow food seems to stimulate people. When you give a seminar about food, seems to stimulate them to do something practical. And I remember when I taught a class on American food, I didn't ask the students to produce cookies and other stuff, but they started to do it automatically once they read historical texts. But I will now talk about something Kadri asked, is this even, is an exhibition already an applied project? I will say yes. And I'm showing an exhibition that goes back to my own interest in understanding Munich, the place where I moved to, which was alien to me originally, not from Munich. But then we did this project with students, and I will share my screen. I hope you can see it in a minute. So, oops.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you see it? Okay. Oops. Okay. So this is the first catalog. Actually, there were two exhibitions that were looking at the environmental history or histories of discovery in Munich and its broader region as well. And all the things that you see on here, like the wind mill and the English garden with the pagoda, the Chinese, were part of the research. There were two exhibitions. One on the left was in the main building of the university in 2017, and the second one was in this other space to the right, which is the so-called white box, kind of a creative area where they're pulling down buildings, a former potato factory, where there are some sheep on the roof in the middle of the city. And you can see the spaces when they're empty. On the left is the hall, the big hall of the main building of the university. And literally tens of thousands of people passed through the exhibition, but they did not necessarily stop, but they did take note of it in 2017. We couldn't get that space in 2019, so we had this white box space on the right. We were lucky in 2019 because we could schedule it so that it would also profit from the long night of museums. And in the long night of museums, all the museums were visited by people who could jump from museum to museum in free buses during that night. I will just introduce a couple of the stations. Here is one that looks at the Isar River in Munich, and you can see the stones. All these stones are connected to climate, obvious, to glacial events a long time ago. And the reason why there's a lot of gravel has a lot to do with the last ice age. So all the stones, some of them from Italy, some of them from Austria, came down into Munich. And here are two students, actually, they happen to be, both of them happen to be geologists, who were trying to identify where these stones came from. When we looked at the river, we did it in a multidisciplinary way. There was also a biologist who looked at water samples from different times. Interestingly, on the left, you see this from 1970. The water is much better in 2011. And they studied the water quality, but they also studied the species and how the different species over time have changed, especially after the river was renaturalized. That was just one topic. Another one, and this is what I find intriguing, is the discovery. In a way, it's a subversive. Or these are all stories of discovery. Here you can see the discovery of what's underneath this mountain, and why is this church hidden? If you wanted to get into that church and would light a candle, it would explode. It's the oldest church in Munich and the territory of Munich. You can see the church back here, but this heap was put onto the church. We did research with people who lived in this place before the heap was put up, and here you can see what happened. To the right, you can see there was chemical stuff put in the 1960s, 70s. Here is the heap, and the church is still back here, but the heap was growing, and now the church is only looking out a little bit, and they remodeled the church and have a second church built next to it. The original medieval one is no longer enterable. So here is historical research. You can see the same hill here, and when you come from the airport, you pass this famous Bayern München soccer stadium, and you see the windmill. Supposedly this is an eco-city, Munich, but in reality, the toxic stuff is here, and the water is permanently being polluted. And we were discovering and unveiling what was going on. So these are detective stories. Here is the link to beer. And again, the link to the Alps, because for Munich to be able to become the beer city had a lot to do with, first, good water quality. Second, having the ability to get ice to the wines, to the beer cellars in the medieval times and in early modern times. And the other reason why Munich has beer is the fact that you could easily dig down because of the gravel. We looked at all sorts of other things like water, sewage, etc., but also interesting, this growing of mushrooms in World War II. Just outside of the Rachel Carson Center during World War II, people in the underground station were growing mushrooms, and we're looking at historical growing of mushrooms, but also trying to do it ourselves, not necessarily only mushrooms, but also all sorts of other plants, trying to figure out what you can do without sunlight. Another story was one, and here's a connection to food, the slaughterhouse story. Of course, it was not easy. Our students couldn't even get into the slaughterhouse, so they had to find ways around it. But they figured out, they found sources about the slaughterhouse and about the treatment of cows, etc. And they were displaying this on the left. You can see this was part of the exhibition. But we were also wondering, because the one sausage that is unique to Munich is the Weißwurst. And the students were creating non-meat Weißwürste and offering them in the exhibition. People didn't even know what they were eating. Interestingly, people preferred the vegetarian Weisswurst to the original meat Weisswurst, whereas they did not like the vegan Weisswurst. But so there's something, it's a bit like with the beer making. There was historical research done on the slaughterhouse, but then we try to get into applications today. Here is I think my last example, maybe not, but one of the, this is an urban garden that is sponsored by the city. And here is what how we displayed it. All these displays were made out of these letters because we didn't have very much money. And then with these big boards, and you can see a lot of photographs were taken by the students. Also, we looked at the plants that they used. And we worked out, for instance, how much it would cost, how much rent a pumpkin would have to pay. And we can tell you that they would have to pay about $500 in rent just to grow one pumpkin. The English Garden was a sound trail thing. So here you see people would go through 21 stations for 3 hours or more. There were different walks through the English Garden that would alert you to what was going on there. Sheep, beaver. There were talks with architects, with people who were using the park in different ways. But there were also activities involved, for instance, getting garbage, finding garbage, etc. This is what was done here. This is what the model. We originally thought, we were wondering how we can, with very little money, make this a nice exhibition. You see the letter here in the background, and people were working together with designers and imagining how they can organize their ideas in space. Here are some other. This is actually this is the site of the second place in the white box. It's close to the Eastern Station. But there was a special project as well for children, so also applied. Actually, children could work in the exhibition, and there was a third catalog for young children. So what I argue here is that there's a difference between applied research and scholarship in engineering or natural science. And it's interesting. I think it will get us into discussion right away, because both Karel and Kate were saying there's a problem at the beginning. We were talking about problems. Yes, I think to some extent I would agree. We're talking about concerns, but I say that the environmental humanities in their application are not focusing on problem solution nexus. So there is something else, and how I would define it is it's a curiosity-driven critical research. So critical, you saw that we were uncovering things that are hidden, for instance, the waste mountain, but it's also co-creative. So people like the shepherd in the English Garden, or the architect, or people in the airport, whoever they interviewed, biologists who helped us understand the creatures in the river, hydrologists, etc. They were co-creators, skill-based. So it's not just reading and writing and researching, but it's other skills that were involved as well, including designing skills. And it's imaginative. So not just problem solution focused, but it's what has recently been called imagination challenges. Practice-oriented scholarship. That's it, yeah. So curiosity-driven, critical research, co-creative, skill-based, imaginative, practice-oriented scholarship. Seems that we need a mouthful, like Kate just said. We need a mouthful in order to define the environmental humanities, the applied environmental humanities. And finally, if you want to see this, actually there's also a film, but there are 2 catalogs. This is the second catalog. You can see virtual exhibitions. There are multiple blogs, films, etc. And whether we will show this exhibition again, we don't know. It's somewhere hidden in a garage at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, thanks a lot. It was, I would say, seemingly just an exhibition, but it took us into really deep history, deep problems, deep questions about the place that we inhabit, and how we should make our way, how we should live there, and also I think what the future of the place would be. So thanks. And I think that these points that you made at the end will certainly come up later on during the discussion. And now we go on with the alphabetical order, and we have project Europe Klimhist that is going to be presented by Christian Roth. So here you go.
Yeah, hello everybody, and thank you for joining this discussion. I would like to present two databases from the Joschka Center for Climate Change Research in Bern to you. The one is Euroclimist and the other is Collective Flood Memory. This is not my own project, but one of my colleagues has built up that, and I will now share my screen to show you a bit about those two platforms. I've already posted the two links, and you can just feel free afterwards to check those databases and just surf and search whatever you want. So just let's have the screen. So can you see my screen? Okay. So this is just at the starting page of Euroclimist. You can see that's also available in English. And just the starting picture is maybe very typical also for communicating climate and climate change to a wider public, because how can you see climate change? It's normally best seen by comparing glaciers, and this is a glacier in Switzerland and the Upper Rhone Valley just around 1856, and there is a second picture which shows how it looks like in 2009. So just feel free then to enter this website. So my short presentation deals on the one hand with Euroclimist and with the collective flood memory, and then finally I would like to summarize the potentials of citizen science in climate and disaster research. So I will mostly focus on this as well, just looking how we can bring in people who are not within the scholarly community, but schools, but other institutions or single people interested in those topics. First of all, Euroclimist, this is a database documenting documentary and instrumental evidence to reconstruct historical weather and climate. So we start in the Middle Ages, and we do not only have documentary and instrumental evidence, but also some cross-references to tree rings and other archives of nature. And this was a database just built up from the late 1970s onwards by my predecessor, Christian Pfister, whom you probably know. And it was just a working database for his book on the history of climate in Switzerland and agricultural impact of climate and so on. And this is both a potential and a problem of this database, because on the one hand, a 50 years development means that some data is quite old, and from our new evaluation standards, this is not still up to date. And so we have quite a lot of things to do. On the other hand, the long history enables us to have a big database built up. In 2010, that was just at the time when I came to Bern, the professionalization of the database just started because we get additional and continuous funding by the Swiss Meteorological Service, by MeteoSwiss, and the so-called Global Climate Observing Service. And they sponsor us year by year, so we have to do an evaluation every 4 years, but still this is quite a fair process, and we can rely on a long-term planning. And so we went and we had it going public in 2015, and now our main target is to build up a larger and larger network for international cooperation projects. Also, for instance, Tallinn University is one of them. And concerning the contributors, I should say that it's not only scientific contributors, but also, for instance, non-academic weather observers. That's also quite an important thing, because they, for instance, observe what the Federal Swiss Meteorological Service doesn't do. So for instance, we have a weather observer from the canton of Glarus in the Swiss Alps who makes a photograph every first of a month, and this is done for the last 30, 40 years. So we can compare how, for instance, the 1st of August was concerning snow cover in the Heim Alps, and so on and so on. We have an accompanying website with introductory texts, which are also designed to be used, for instance, in school projects and others. So it's on the sources, it's on the historical climatology in general, and so on. And then you can enter the data search area and can get information for the climatic development of the last 700 years. And so maybe just to give you an impression on the types of data sets, so we have daily and even sub-daily weather observation. We have proxy data, that means phenological observation on plants and snow. We have long series of temperature, precipitation, ice breakups, grain prices, and the like. And we have also some information on the consequences of extreme weather on natural hazards, which is also a very important thing, in particular for a wider public. So when you just enter, you get a search template like that. So if you just enter for the first time, you have just to register. You can do that as a standard user, so you don't have to do anything else than to check the username and so on and so on. But you can also do it as a scientific user. So all of you, of course, are scientific users, and this enables you also to download large amounts of results and so on. So, but this is still cross-checked. So if you just apply for a scientific user access, that will need maybe some days until you are enabled. And then this search engine is let's say, politically correct for Switzerland. We have all major Swiss languages, and of course English as a standard language for the scientific communities. And then you can search for both the single records and the series. So just try it out. It's very easy. And there is also a guideline how to do and some examples what you could do. You can also look for specific regions. So this is, for instance, an example for Ireland. So you can click on, for instance, some counties you're interested in, or some also, let's say, area of a specific lake or whatever, and then you get the results in this case as well. So we have now done that for overall Europe, so to have the modern administrational units, and also lakes and mountainous areas and so on, what you can look. On the other hand, all those spatial visualizations are used by ourselves also for data assessment. For instance, when we just restarted and did the go in public in 2015, and you looked, for instance, for the summer flood of 1834 in Switzerland, you got this result, and this was a bit misleading for us. For instance, there was one dot with fake information because this would be here in general, but this was a sign for us that we have to look closer. If it's only written, for instance, okay, there's a flood on this or that river, and we don't know, is it upstream or is it just close to the mouth of the river. And you can see, for instance, here in the southwest of Switzerland, we have a very dense coverage, but here the data was still not inserted, and that's what we only recognized when doing those assessment checks in 2015. So it's still work in progress to improve this database. And just to show you these different results, so that would be, for instance, a result list. You get information on weather, for instance, a contemporary weather report from the 16th century. You get information on disasters, for instance, on a flood in 1522. You get information on phenology, when, for instance, the starting of the grain harvest. And you get information on long-time climate, for instance. This is a tree ring series from the Swiss Alps that can be combined with the other results. And yeah, just try this database, and just a second database is collective flood memory. If we look at flood memory in general, this has vanished a bit during the last 100 years. If you look, for instance, at flood marks, which were the typical flood memory signs in the past. In the last years, single floods, some blocks are, for instance, installed. For instance, there had been a big flood in 2005 in Bern, in particular in the old quarter for the craftsmen, the so-called Mate quarter. And then this was maybe a stimulus to create a database with a high visualization effort, and collective flood memory was then going online since 2018. And this was quite an interesting project, because it was by a colleague, Olivia Rompeinen-Martius, who built it up, and her professorship is sponsored by the largest Swiss property and real estate insurance, the so-called Mobiliar insurance. And they were, of course, also interested in showing a possible risk of floods to general public. And therefore, they created a platform with a map, and then you can zoom in and you can get all those photographs, or also old drawings from those floods from the 14th century onwards up to now. You have the link here, and then you can look for specific areas or specific time spans or events. And when you enter the platform, you get a call for active participation. So anyone entering this platform will be invited to upload own historical or current pictures, and also to assist to locate uploaded pictures. So the general public is invited to contribute here very, very actively. And it could be something like the flood marks of the 21st century, because the dimensions of the flood can be visible again. And what is also interesting, it's a bottom-up process, like the flood marks on a single private house just from the past. Now this is made by this platform, or could be made. And for instance, this is an example from Lucerne, city on Lake Lucerne in the central Swiss area in the Alps. And you can see here a timeline. You can just, for instance, take, let's say, 1910 to 2018, and then you can zoom in and you get the photographs. And so I just pointed out that the example of 1910, because that was just at the end of the Belle Epoque, the Schweizerhof Quay, what you can see here, that is famous lake quay. This is flooded at that time, and we have quite a lot of bourgeois people just going in boats, and it's more a tourist attraction than anything else. Or if you look at this photograph just to the right, you can see even a dromedar just running through the water, because there was a circus that had been evacuated due to the flood. So it's a very good sample just taken from the museum, from the Lucerne Municipal Archives. Just to finish, so we have high potential of citizen science in those projects, because on the one hand, a large number of photographs, but also other sources are still in private collections. They can be just addressed by, for instance, newspaper calls, also the calls by, for instance, this mobiliar insurance. They can be addressed by school projects, by university projects. And one of the main issues is to raise flood awareness in a wider public, because that was a problem in 2005, for instance, when the last big flood in Switzerland took place. And what we can ask is this a helpful initiative to reduce conflicts over flood prevention in the future? So also for politics, this might be also a very important tool to show the flood risk and to raise flood awareness. So thank you very much for this, for your attention, and I'm open for your questions.
Thank you. I think this project was yeah, the catchword here in the abstract was citizen science, but I also spotted the elements of edutainment or entertaining education here, and also some implications for city planning, probably, and policy making in general. So
I think it doesn't contradict itself to each other. But you're absolutely right. Yeah.
So I think we can take these keywords to the discussion and some more. And now we have our final project that we want to showcase from Augsburg University. And this is called the Plastic Odyssey, and it will be presented by Kirsten Schwelbeck and Pia Winterholler. So.
Thank you. I don't want to talk a lot because it's mainly, the stage is mainly here for Pia, but I would like to say a few words about how to embed her work into the work of our center, because we are not a department, we are a hub, a central institute that brings together people who work in the environmental humanities from various different departments. And we are actually, or we come from the natural sciences. So I've had my job for almost for 1.5 years, so most of it was during Corona. But the idea behind my position is to integrate the environmental humanities into an institution that is mainly a natural science institution, and to recreate the institute as such in connection with environmental humanities. And I would like to just share our website so that you can get an idea of what we are doing. What you see here is our flowering field. So we are actually also doing local projects. My boss, Jens Söntgen, who is also a chemist and a philosopher, is doing the so-called histories of substances, which is a mix between environmental scientific chemistry and so on studies and philosophical ideas, history and so on. So it's a very interdisciplinary project. And if you have time, you can also look at these little videos that he made about substances. So that, and we also cooperate, of course, with a lot of local institutions, with the water management in Augsburg, for example, and also with a local brewery, with a bakery and so on. My own project is about wheat, so we also work with the museum for grain and art. we have quite a few students who do their PhDs with us, and they come from very different fields, and they come together in our rooms and to discuss their work. And one of them is Pia Winterholler, who is a student in environmental ethics. And she's a wonderful example for what you can actually do in a transdisciplinary and practical way in the environmental humanities. But she's also an exception, as I must say, still. I hope that's not the future of the environmental humanities in our university. I don't think it is the future, because as you probably know, we just are about to start with a doctoral program, and there is a strong transdisciplinary component in it. So Pia's work might be a way of pioneering work as we want to do it. She has invented a computer game that she's going to introduce to us in the context of environmental ethics. She could do this together also with the Department of Pedagogy, which for her was a lucky coincidence or cooperation also. And I think she can tell you more about her work now. I'll just stop and end this.
Yes, thank you very much, Kirsten, for the introduction. First questions, do you hear me with the earplugs? So, okay, fine. Second, and I put the website into the chat, which we are going to have a look at. And because there are levels secured by password, which players have to work out during the game. But to make it easier for you, I gave you passwords as well. So if you want to have a closer look later on, you can write down the passwords and have easier work with the website. Now, first, I want to give some introducing words on my project. I'm just sharing the screen. Okay. Just a second. Okay, yeah, I think as you already know, the Plastic Odyssey, it is called, is a teaching and learning game for actually any age group. It was my master's thesis, which I handed in already in September 2019. And it is a browser-based game for any age, educational background, dealing, as the name already says, on the topic of plastic pollution, and especially on ways how we can reduce it in everyday life. The idea why I created a game and not just a text or handbook was to provide access to information on plastic pollution, especially for people who are not already part of the, call it, educational elite, meaning children who already have access to this kind of information in school or inside the family, because the family already established ways of living plastic reduced life. And I want to encourage learning also by this kind of user-friendly look, easy access, meaning you do not have to register, you do not have to pay, you do not need any special app, and the website actually works on any digital devices, a computer or mobile phone. And the concept, the teaching concept, is based on the aims of education for sustainable development, which are based on the Sustainable Development Goals by the United Nations. And furthermore, this Plastic Odyssey, as Kirsten already said, was a co-working between the chair of the environmental ethics, which I studied, and the school for and the chair for school pedagogics. And this is why I based it on the 5-pillar concept of an education for sustainable development, which was set up by Klaus Zierer. And this means 5 pillars: emotion, information, reflection, motivation, and implementation, which is kind of or giving kind of a narrative arc, which makes it very, or which I found very useful to build my narrative on and my topic on. But we will see later how it works. And those 5 pillars are reflected by 5 levels of the game. So what the actually intentions are, first is to raise awareness on the problem of plastic pollution, to provide broad information on plastic pollution, especially on the problems, causes, and connections. Also to teach or to give instruction on self-reflection and ethical understanding and decision-making. And also raise self-awareness and a self-image of me as a responsible human being inside the world community of beings, not only human beings, but all living beings. And the most important in the end is to establish new ways of thinking, of acting, and finding new routines which can provide a way of reducing plastic consumption, plastic waste, and environmental pollution, especially in everyday life of the individual person or family or group or institution. The target group, as I already said, it's actually anybody, but I think it's specially suited for example, school classes or groups, as we will later see. Is recommended to take time in order to set up this different routines, to take time for self-reflection. Of course, you can pick up some information and leave the website, but I think the gain is the bigger, the more time you give to yourself. And yeah, the basic base of the game is the website, but I provided also a script. If somebody wants to do it as a school project, you can note down your findings, can write down the experiments and self-reflecting tasks which are given in the Plastic Odyssey, and you can do it as a single person, of course, inside a family or as a school or youth group maybe. So now I want you to have a look at the website because time is short, and but first we had set up a small survey in order to gain access to the game, and I hope the survey works.
Yeah. So
okay.
Shall I just push the button, launch polling, right?
Yes, exactly. So
and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. I want to test your knowledge on plastic pollution, especially the time plastic needs to decompose in the environment. Maybe, or most of you know that plastic cannot decompose completely, but it decomposes into smaller and smaller pieces until there is nothing left to see anymore. But so we want to check your knowledge now. And the first question is, how long does it take for a plastic bag to decompose? Does it take approximately 2 to 5 years, 10 to 20 years, or 50 to 70 years? So what are you thinking? Okay, can you show the results already?
Well, I think if you stop sharing the screen and I share mine, because I have the poll open, and and I can see how the answers come in real time. I can't see how you see the poll, but
at the moment I don't see anything.
Okay, but the participants evidently have found the poll and are enjoying it. Is that right?
I hope so.
Yes.
Okay,
right.
Let's check on the result.
Okay, well, at the moment, as not everyone has voted yet, I can just share the screen and show how the backside of the polling looks like.
That would be nice.
All right. So here you can see.
We're seeing a Word document right now.
Oh, but you don't see. Sorry, the Word document should be shown only later. But you don't see this poll.
We still see our poll. Maybe you have to. Maybe you have to close it
then yeah, this is the first time for me to have this poll. So I will end polling and then see what happens.
Okay, let's check it out. Okay,
share results.
Oh, fine. I've got the results now. So. Okay, the first question, how long does it take for a plastic bag to decompose? The answer is 10 to 20 years. So a little bit shorter, as most of you guessed. The second one, the plastic bottle, actually takes around 450 years to decompose. The baby nappy takes 200 to 500 years, depending on the environmental circumstances. The cigarette butt is just 1 to 5 years, and the fishing net or fishing line needs around 600 years. So the intention is to show the huge time span plastic needs to decompose in the environment, and thinking that we just are producing plastics for around 100 years and have this big amount of plastic in the environment by now, you can guess how much a problem there will be when we think what is in 100, 200, 600 years. So this was just a short demonstration of the kind of quizzes you have to deal inside the game. But now I want to give you also a short look at the website itself. I think you see my screen again. So this is the starting page of the website. It's a small welcoming text, as well as followed by an introduction here on the next page. Here, so the story kind of leads through the game. Here I opened the levels now to have an easier navigation, but actually usually they are closed so that the players cannot switch or jump between the topics. So here's one more quiz I provide inside the game in order to make it a little bit more fun to dive into the topic. So the quizzes provide the passwords for the levels, and here's the second level, which is providing information. The first level would be emotion or emotionalization. The internet's a little bit slow now. And this first level is providing I put there 4 videos which show situation of plastic pollution around the globe. Here is it's actually a song, a really nice song, but with really pressing pictures. one more video showing live on a dump where plastic waste is put. And here one more video by Greenpeace. And here one more video showing plastic pollution in the environment. And I put there 4 reflective tasks. This is, for example, think of situations in your everyday life where you're getting in touch with a plastic and note down what you find in your script in order. This is the first entrance into the topic to demonstrate that everybody of us has contact with this problem. And I cannot go deeper into the levels, but the second level is to switch between my toolbar of Zoom. Yeah, the second level is the information level, dealing with what is plastics or synthetic materials, what's the history of plastic, and so on. The level 3 is mainly on self-reflecting. How am I myself part of the problem, but how can I contribute to new ways of dealing with the problem? Level 4 is showing, ways how to actually reduce plastic in everyday life, to reuse, to recycle, to reduce, ways how you can make your bathroom, your kitchen, or your school things plastic free. We can do zero waste in the bathroom, or how you can make cosmetics or body lotions yourself, and so on. And level 5 gives some ideas or inspiration. Sorry, here it is. How you can implement this new knowledge in your everyday life, in school, in your family. This is, for example, a suggestion to do waste collecting together, or to organize a plastic-free break at school with plastic-free foods, or to provide plastic-free drinks in your school, for example, water from the tap, and so on. So I think I'm running out of time. That's why I'm getting you back to our Zoom room, and I'm thanking you for your attention. I'm sorry if it got a little bit long, and I'm open for questions now.
Thanks. My first question was the poll from the first level, and we pretty much failed.
Yeah, you mean the one we did here, or the one with Shesh?
Yeah, the one we did here.
I think it worked, but it worked different from how I thought it would work. So, but I think it was okay. We could. It was just to give you an idea how it is to play actually, because I had to modify it for you, because not. I thought it would be too complicated to play directly on the website, because the website is by now only in German and not in English. So I did this poll here for the Zoom meeting.
All right, thanks. And I think this project again looks like a kind of like a school education or educational project, but it contains so much more. And probably even ends up in influencing industrial politics.
That would be nice.
But now I'd like to thank once more everyone who was sharing their projects, and we will now proceed to the discussion part. We are planning to have 1 hour for presenting and 1 hour for discussion. So we've had a little bit more for presenting, and we'll just have to see how long we will be able to discuss. If you would have any immediate questions for the presenters, I think we could do this. And then I would show you this document that was on the screen once already, where I tried to systematize all these aspects of applied environmental humanities. But first, any urgent questions? Okay, Gary has a question, but it's not urgent. Okay, then perhaps I will share the screen, and just a moment. I will open this because as you were speaking, I was updating a scheme that I made about the aspects of applied environmental humanities based on first the report on applied environmental humanities from the Swiss crew. And then I tried to combine the aspects that we had proposed in our abstract, and then some more aspects that became very evident while I was listening to all these presentations. So now I will just offer it to you for criticism and comments, because when I was reading this report, it seemed to me that most of the aspects of applied or applications were dealing with what we could do inside academia, inside this bubble that we have in the center here, like how environmental humanities should cooperate with scientists, with artists. I also added craft research, because this is something that brings us back to beer brewing, for example, or repairing things. And then university teaching was also something that was presented as an applied project, basically. And then I tried to list some things. When I start from here, university teaching is closely related to writing textbooks. Then we had museums and exhibitions, working together with museums. This again brings us to edutainment programs, but also popular education, broadcasts. Then from there, a step on is where the agency shifts from the researchers to the public, citizen science, where people can contribute to their own observations. Then we have cooperation with communities that Sharon presented, where communities both receive help, but also should be able to give their own input into the research. Then we have an activist corner here with all the campus gardens and street activism and protests. Then multi-species perspective, that is what I added. It's not probably in the best place here, but there it is. And then we have the corner of politics here. Lobbying, then what Marcus Hall and others proposed, that we should have more environmental humanitarians participating in all sorts of decision-making bodies, but also it has something that one aspect is going directly into politics, like Green parties have done. But then below here we also have phenomena like social entrepreneurship, project management, and social and spin-off companies, and something that I must say that in Estonian research system, when it is asked whether you are doing any applied things, it means, are you doing anything that can be capitalized, that can be sold? And this is where spin-off companies come into the play, and this is perhaps something that that is not usually associated with applied humanities, but this is just the first overview, and now you're welcome to comment or say whether this kind of conceptualization of this huge field of applied environmental humanities would make any sense, or would we need to do it in a different manner? Because we heard very diverse range of projects. Christoph and then Kate.
Yeah, thanks very much for sharing this model. I think it's interesting. It shows definitely the complexity of environmental humanities, and there's so many different actors. I would make sure that I would make a distinction between actors, institutions, and then modes of interacting with them. It seems to me, I mean, here you've got lobbying is something that you're doing versus a Green Party. So on one hand, you've got actors or institutions in this model. I also wonder, I was wondering, you know, when you have scientists, the way we deal with what scientists do is typically using pre-existing expertise. So we use it. In most of the other actions that we take in applied humanities, it seems to be that we are taking more active part. We are communicating either through by informing or by educating. We are co-creating, for example, with artists. We are producing. We're using and we are lobbying in the political sphere. So I would just make this distinction between what we are doing as environmental humanities scholars, and also you know, and the institutions that we are interacting with. But I'm wondering what our role is as scholars. And it's actually triggered by the last paper that I really liked. I really liked what Pia was telling us about, you know, but are we also responsible for checking the information, for instance? Because you know, what is our role as humanities scholars? I think what is it, the difference between, you know, I just learned from a scientist, a soil scientist, that it takes at least 800 years for a composable plastic bag to decompose, and thousands of years, and this in arid desert climates. Now we are taking this information from somewhere. What is our responsibility? I mean, we are basically educating. We can't really do everything. We're communicating. We can't do fact checking, but we may have to do it. So I'm wondering what our role is as scholars. I'm also wondering what the specificity is of humanities here. You know, some of the projects, people would say, well, this is all human geography, or, you know, historical geography. What is it that makes it specifically environmental humanities? So I like the project. I think it's totally fascinating to have this, you know, it's like a firework of ideas also stimulating. And the model to some extent reflects but it's difficult to define, as you said in the beginning, Kadri, the environmental humanities based on that model, because it's everything. So sorry, I was talking too long now, but I enjoyed that, and seeing that is helpful, definitely.
Yeah, it's I wrote down these questions, and I think we will return to these because it's very important. Like, what is our role as humanitarians or scholars of humanities? What are the things that we are good at doing, what we should be doing, and what are the things that would be better to be left to somebody else, perhaps? But Kate had a question or comment. Do you want me to have this screen share, or shall I stop?
I don't know, in a way it's quite useful to see it, but on the other hand, then we can't see each other as well. Although there is a way to get, I've got six little postage stamps of people, so you can get more people there.
I've got everybody. You can just move it.
Okay, that's cool. Okay.
There's a little symbol between, so you can move it back and slide it back and forth.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I've been reminded, not for the first time, of Marx's 11th thesis on Feuerbach, where he says that in the past, philosophers have only ever sought to understand the world. The point is to change it. And I think that the environmental humanities is a kind of intervention in the self-understanding of the humanities. Because one of the things I suppose that you could say is common to the humanities is its hermeneutic orientation, that it's about understanding, it's about interpreting, whether it's the past, whether it's ideas, whether it's literary texts. You know, all of the humanities are about understanding. But I think people who have been drawn into kind of co-creating this strange amorphous beast that we're calling the environmental humanities desperately want to change the world. So we're kind of pursuing an 11th thesis on Feuerbach kind of agenda. But in fact, the task is to both understand and to change. So we need to sublate the opposition that Marx sets up there between understanding and changing. And what does that look like? And I was thinking about Christoph's observation that environmental humanities research was not necessarily about solving problems, but it was nonetheless practice oriented. And I think there's a bit of a clue there that is really worth dwelling on. That the phrase that we came up with was addressing environmental problems. So it's about opening avenues for intervention, opening possibilities of change by working with communities. And I want to come back to your cooperating with communities. I'd push that further to say that what I think is kind of some of the most exciting work that's being done in the environmental humanities is co-investigating with knowledge holders beyond the academy. And this includes, in some cases, non-human others as well. There's a gorgeous collection. Everybody should read it. It's fantastic. It's called Participatory Research in More Than Human Worlds. And it was co-edited by my former colleague, Owen Jones, and Michelle Bastian, and a couple of other people. But it's about actually, you know, doing research which is in itself transformative. So the change, the intervention doesn't happen sort of indirectly afterwards because maybe people have read your book, but the actual process of doing the research. And of course, within social science research, the model is participatory action research. And this doesn't necessarily solve problems, but it opens avenues for addressing them and intervening in the world. So that's my pitch for co-investigation, co-creation.
All right, thanks. Now, Gary said he had a non-urgent question.
All, thank you so much. I've given so many papers to small audiences, but the power and the value of your presentations are, I can't do justice to it. I will tell you that I come to these conferences in order to steal ideas, and I will take all of your ideas, and the citizens and the students of SUNY Plattsburgh in upstate New York will benefit. Kate, you anticipated my question, or I would love for you all to speak to each other about Christoph's comment, and Christoph, when you put that out there, that environmental humanities may not be problem-oriented, I got very, very excited, right? Because in a way, it seems like we can't do anything unless we're solving a problem, right? Or anything of value unless we're solving a problem, and it bothers me, right? So the curiosity, imagination, critical thinking here, I get more and more excited. And at the same time, I'm wondering, here in America, I think that those human values don't hold up as well to solving the problem of fill in the blank. And so I'm wondering if all of you think that it can be both. And I think, Kate, you kind of anticipated or moved in that direction by using the language of addressing. But I also do want to hold out the possibility that Christoph is, by opposing it, please forgive me, I'm thinking this out as I'm talking, by opposing it, you make the environmental humanities distinct from science technology studies or fill in the blank, and there could be some value in saying, yes, what we do in environmental humanities is distinct from what the technocrats or what have you do. So I find myself torn between wanting to use the language of problem-based solutions and also resisting it just a little bit, or I'll probably at the end of the day do what Kate does, which is you address and bring the two together, I suppose. So I'll stop rambling. Thank you, and thank you, and thank you for your English too. I always feel guilty when I'm in European places and you have to all conform to English. So wonderfully done.
Thanks. Christoph, do you want to respond?
I hadn't thought that through myself, but I mean, when we, I'm just. I have to say what I enjoy, what I think is the greatest thing really about the environmental humanities is the combination of co-creating and discovering and envisioning and the openness that comes with it. And I see and I'm working closely with many natural scientists, even with engineers. I don't have to teach, but I'm teaching for instance, with architects, and I see the type of questions that they ask. I get much more out of, by the way, I get much more out of teaching with people who come from very different disciplines. So they would ask, how can we make, okay, we need to find out what the function of trees is in a city. That's what some architects who are doing applied research are asking, and I miss in these questions, or in the wind tunnel question that in that image, I miss the openness. And I think that if we reduce our research, I mean, the problem is that some of the problem, that not all there are so many problems created by us in research that are not relevant. And I think it's our job as environmental humanities scholars is also to come up with questions that haven't been asked. We don't necessarily know the problem. We want to, but we are surrounded. I also don't like the word problem, I have to say. And I mean, Gary, you're an American. Americans don't normally use the word problem. They try to avoid it. They use the word challenge. And I like to be challenged, and I think that's what we should pursue. I think we should be challenged by the world around us and react to it in a more open way than an engineer. That's our great opportunity in this field that is not narrowly defined. So what if if it was true that we wanted to do problem, and by the way, I should say everything that Kate said, I can underwrite, because the addressing solves the problem, which I hear is a real problem of how do you the language problem of using the word problem in our discipline. But I don't want to be reduced to problem solving. I think that's a bottom line.
Thank you so much for that, Christoph. I completely agree with you. Wonderful conversation.
Thanks. And yeah, I would also say that this question, the problem of the problem, probably brings us a little bit back to the question of the cooperation between humanitarians and scientists, who are very problem-oriented people. And when you think of how the standard research paper is written, then you need to define the problem in the beginning, and you need to demonstrate at the end of the paper, after 6 pages, that you have found the solution to the problem that you initially proposed. And it seems to me that humanities are kind of giving in to this sort of logic, this sort of thinking. And it is not something that we should necessarily do. And therefore, some positive alternatives are necessary. And then this, sorry, just a moment. This practice-oriented scholarship that Christoph proposed would perhaps be something that would help us further. And this is something that is also, this set of questions is present also in this Swiss report. The questions like how we could offer real solutions to real problems, but also how we should mix together the different types of knowledge, or the different epistemological approaches. And I think this is the question that we can't really solve here with the remaining 2 minutes. But again, as Christoph pointed out, that perhaps it's time to shift, or who did this? Perhaps it's time to shift from solution-based scholarship to question-based scholarship. Why not just give a whole set of questions instead of a whole set of answers? Kirsten?
Maybe just a remark. When you showed the film about the brewery, I sketched down a couple of questions and criticisms, and over the course of the film, all of these questions and criticisms, became null, because you are doing all the things that came to my mind as a humanities scholar. And I think this is what this actually is, that to integrate transdisciplinary projects into academic work, and use that again as an inspiration to continue the academic work and embed it and communicate it as a larger, as something larger than just beer. And I think you did that so wonderfully, that I think that beer would taste even better now, than if I just bought the product. And this is also because what I think about when you said maybe it's a critical thing to commercial or use this knowledge in a commercial context. If you use it in a commercial context and sell knowledge and the openness of the knowledge that Christoph just mentioned along with it, I don't find it so problematic, to use the term again, of the problem. It's to show how enriching it actually can be to think about products and look at them manifold dimensions. And then again, it's a narrative that, these are narratives that we can tell.
And this is what humans as a species and humanitarians in especially are good at telling stories. But our time is pretty much up now. And I think we have the chance for a final round of comments. And I propose that we will just go around the whole Zoom screen and everyone can make a comment, for example, about what do you think counts as applied environmental humanities? And we start from the upper left corner, Sharon.
Well, I just want to say thanks to everybody for their presentations. It's one of the things I love about this discipline is the variety, I suppose, and I think that's demonstrated in what we've seen this afternoon. I mean, I'm learning, so I'll still sort of finding my way a little bit. But for me, I suppose applied environment, what we bring to the party, if you like, is the ability to see a broader picture. So I'm working with some great conservationist colleagues, and as you say, they see a problem and they see a solution to that problem, but the ability to implement that solution successfully relies on a wider and broader understanding of culture and history and all of those contexts which make people receptive to behavioural change. And so for my project, that's what we bring to the party here, is that contextual understanding of how a landscape and how a place is created, and how that can impact on our receptiveness to behavioural changes which then benefit the environment around us. So, yeah.
Thanks. And we go on to Kate.
Well, I feel I've almost kind of said my piece actually, but I guess it's humanities research that is also informed by or in collaboration with other disciplines, and that is oriented towards combining understanding, imagination, and transformation. So it's research that makes some kind of a difference in the world, in whatever way that might be. And also knowing that one can't always control or predict those impacts. So it's an imprecise art, but I think it's in that kind of combination of understanding, imagination, and transformation that I would locate it.
Thanks. Yeah, we go on to Pia. You're muted.
Yeah, thank you all for this very inspiring workshop. What I liked most on all the presentations was the multi-dimensional view on this broad field of environmental humanities, but also on the broad field of how we can transform our society into to bring our society into a more sustainable future for anybody on this planet. Means to include also minorities, which is only possible, I think, if we look on things in an open-mindedness kind of way, to be able to experiment on things, on questions, on answers, to leave the known paths of how we do science and to find new ways, as was best presented today, how those new ways or what these new ways can look like. And it gave me a lot of inspiration for my own work, and I hope to be able to join around like this again soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks. We will continue experimenting, yes. Definitely. Christoph.
Yeah, maybe I can make 2 points. One point would be, and I make it concrete. One of my doctoral students a few years ago wrote a wonderful dissertation in literature on climate change fiction. And the fascinating thing for me was when she presented her research to people, let's say in insurance agencies, they were intrigued by it, by the imagination of the novelists. So this is the sort of horizon that I think we can think about as that's our freedom. It's very different from just questions and answers, whether replacing answers with questions or something, but it's about multiple imaginations, imagining worlds that could be disastrous and imagining worlds that could be good worlds for us. I think, and then be analytical about that, doing research about that. I think that's how I would define the environmental humanities, but the potential, the real potential. So we are mining imaginations and texts and other artworks, etc., for their potential to show us different worlds that can be disastrous or wonderful. And I think that's so important. If you think about what is the humanity aspect of the humanities, the human mind, it's Geisteswissenschaften in German is about the spirit, the mind, using our mind, not only data. So it's very different type of perspectives on which we draw. And the second point is a very different one, and that is more generally about the humanities and where we are at this point. Because many of us have defined ourselves as environmental humanities because we were afraid and we want to survive. There are people in, let's say, German literature who say now, we want to be German, we want to be environmental humanities people because we matter. And I think this is, in a way, problematic because we become so defensive and so apologetic. I think we should think differently about our way of making a difference in society. I think the environmental humanities in society, that's how I would think them always, are enormously powerful. We are educating the public through all sorts of, we are out there as humanities scholars in museums, we're out there in schools, and why does an engineer, and I love engineers, I'm embarrassing, I even love cars. But I think that we should not be the ones who say, always have to defend that we play no role in society. We are extremely important. If you could measure it, we don't want to measure it, we would have much more of an impact. So I want us to have different attitudes as humanities scholars, are much more, well, I don't know how to say it, proud, it's not the right word, but yes, maybe I want us to be proud of the multiple entanglements that we understand, and the relevance and the cultural products that we understand that are so important also for humans to live on this planet.
Well, thanks. I think this use your mind, not only your data, would make a great slogan. And I think here is a good, really good step to Christian to continue.
Yeah, thank you, Christoph. I totally agree with your position, and I would just follow up with that. And I was not totally, so after this wide range of topics we heard about today and approaches, I was not very fine with this term defining applied environmental humanities any longer, because defining always means limiting to a specific sample of topics or approaches and so on and so on. And that's what we do not want to do, because we are always connected with the social sciences and the natural sciences in any of those approaches. So I would rather say positioning applied environmental humanities. So, and then it fits very well what Christoph said, that it is on using the human mind, it's on education, it's on language, it's on visual arts, and so on and so on. And in this way, this can always become broader and broader. And so defining is the other way around, to say this is in and others are out. And therefore, maybe it was more a session on positioning applied environmental humanities, and yeah, maybe that could move us forward for the overall acceptance of our approaches, because then we are accepted in our position, and together with other sciences, from the social sciences to the natural sciences, maybe medicine or whatever could be included as well.
Very good, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it turns out that defining is not a good thing at all. It's not what we're doing here. Thank you. Kirsten.
A lot has been said already, but I would like to take up Christoph's remark about the entanglements. I was thinking of the secret lives of trees, and this whole movement, I would say, from the natural sciences, where natural scientists and forest experts and so on tell interesting bestseller stories actually about nature. And I think what we can do is we can add to these stories by showing the entanglements with the human world and the human interaction with trees. I mean, these trees are not just there because they're not just a network because of the natural networks that's there, but it's a network that we are helping to build and that we continuously interact with. And I would like to expand these stories and make them as exciting as they already are. So I think, that is something very positive also that we can add apart from the problem-oriented way of thinking. But I also think that we know how to tell these stories because we know so much about how stories are told. And I don't mean that in a manipulative manner, but in the way of reflecting upon how stories are told, have been told, and how we are telling these stories. So I think our strength is not just to interact with the environmental, the stories of the natural sciences, but to reflect on how these stories are told and to maybe tell them differently, and to continuously think about how we tell them critically as well.
Yep, thanks. Ulrike.
So to make it quick, maybe I'm not so happy with Christoph and the understanding that we have to make the environmental historian approach huge and large, and I know we actually have to do that, but actually what we did, at least at Tallinn University, and I personally think it works pretty fine and it's maybe a good approach, is just to allow ourselves to be small and to be naive, and to because I really think that it might be there where creativity lies. The more we are really going for the big goals and big narratives and to be too political or whatsoever, maybe we are, maybe we're not so creative anymore. At least I can see it at Tallinn University. It's good to really let the big goals go for a moment and to be naive again, to go for a bit more creativity. And I think that's really where we as humanitarians are really good in, and we should better be in that, to be creative and to make more of our world.
And it's just what Pia also pointed out, that what perhaps should be more experimenting in our environmental humanities, but the question is how to experiment so that it is successful without losing one's job, for example, for experimenting too much. But for the last row, I would do so that I would give the word to Kaarel, then Kati, and then save our last remaining guest for the final words. So Kaarel.
Yes, thanks. Yes, we all know this sentence, thinking out of the box, but I think also we should talk out of the box. that means it's very nice to have a conversation among the people who thinks the same way, but it's maybe even more subtle to talk with those people who does not think like us, and then to try to, how to make us for them useful, like we are dealing with a brewery or something, so that they see we are useful. Then we can achieve things. Because if we remain only among ourselves, or we remain only among our communities, which think already the same way as we want, that gives us more power to explain ourselves who we are, but the message will not get out of the box.
Yep. And Kati can continue.
I jumped in halfway, so I don't even know if I should be talking, but I will do anyway. One of the biggest joys with environmental humanities is that I think that's why it has been so attractive, is that it is very creative in a sense that you don't need to define yourself to start with. You know, you don't need to decide what I'm doing medieval wells or Thoreau, and you do this for a whole career. You know, you can actually jump from topic to topic, from field to field, and in many ways, environmental humanities is what takes the environmental turn, the material turn seriously, also the entangled histories and multidisciplinary, multi-species studies seriously, in a sense that, you know, you want to see materiality behind the environmental discursive reality in many ways. So applied environmental humanities will inevitably be a very diverse field, because there is like infinite number of entanglements and points of contact, and as soon as you try to define it, you will probably miss a huge field of applications, huge field of impacts, whether you want to, you know, whether you want to do science for impact or you want to do it for fun. It's still, you know, in contact with people outside of you know, the discursive box that you will get something new. You know, you go and teach engineers. I also do that, like Christoph, and get crazy questions and, you know, very operational questions, and I get upset. Like, I mean, how can you even ask like that? Or you meet a brewery, or I agree with Kate, as you do research, then you can see the impact. You know, you go to a municipality and so how do you think about that? And they say, we've never thought about it. And, you know, they will never read any of your articles. So they will never get any of your academic sophistication. So it's really doing this research that gives impact, and that is probably the most valuable part of environmental humanities. So the real challenge is how to make the academic evaluators to understand that. But it's probably the core of it, and that makes it enjoyable as well as frustrating at some point.
Thanks. That brought this discussion to meta level, I would say. And now we have our guest listener, and it would be really interesting to hear the reflections from outside the little bubble.
Is that me, the guest listener?
Yes, Mehdi.
Okay.
That's you.
Thank you very much. It's been amazing listening to the presentations, and I found them very interesting. I am a PhD student of environmental humanities in the University of Stavanger, and I actually joined environmental humanities with my background is in literature, and I joined this field because I actually felt it has this potential to be applied. So this is an open question to me still. However, I have this faith in storytelling coming from literature, and I especially have faith in it because of its potential to bring people together. And I'm talking about stories that are written in ways that cater for different audiences. And we do not regularly write in that way in academia. So all these stakeholders that we wish to engage in conversation could be addressed through stories, and these stories can bring them together. And then we can also play a role, I would say, as people in this field to kind of host such conversations and moderate these conversations in ways that does not let it easily go toward the solution-oriented direction, but rather to kind of encourage this continuous imagination about alternatives. So we can have these different contributions to the application, I would say. And when it comes to the word problem, I was thinking about that just to share my reflections on that. I think actually there is not an issue with the word problem. I think it's the solution that is the issue. Like a lot of these approaches are solution oriented. Actually, the humanities have always been problem oriented. It's just that they don't want to solve it so quickly because it's always multifaceted. So I tend to think of what I do as a PhD student. I tend to present myself sometimes as a problem finder. And so I actually see that as valuable work, and it is a challenge for the humanities still to kind of argue for problem finding as a contribution, because that is what we can contribute to, and we have a history about contributing to that. But it still keeps being not credited enough because it's not helping to solve issues enough. So I think I will stick to problem finding and trying to make stories that kind of narrate these problems and bring people together so we can talk about those problems.
Right, thanks. I think this is something that brings us back to this Swiss report that, among other things, proposes that perhaps we should also offer not only solution-oriented research, but questions-oriented research, or a research that offers you a bunch of questions, and that's the result. And another thing that I think you pointed out and would be really nice thing to round this discussion up is that storytelling in essence is a collective endeavor. You need to have listeners, interested listeners, in addition to those who talk as well. And this is something where this applied dimension steps in. You need to tell the story so that you find interested listeners. And how we would do this, I think, is the discussion for the next round. This is already another story. So I think, thank you very much. And it's really interesting and thought-provoking, and I hope that we will meet soon again. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye all together. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.